Hi everyone, thanks for being here today. I'm really glad we're having this conversation because honestly, it's not easy. It's not an easy topic. My name is HASSANAL ZAIRI.
My name is MITHRASRI SURESH.
And my name is IMAN and MOHAMAD SUHAIMI.
And our discussion is going to focus on social media and sexting. Now, I know even just hearing those words might make some people a little uncomfortable. Like, should we even be talking about this? But that's exactly why it's important. This is happening all around us, among friends, classmates, even in the media we consume. And if we don't talk about it, we're just pretending it doesn't exist. Before we dive in, let's agree on some ground rules. Because I want this to be a safe space where we feel safe to be real. Number one, we respect each other's opinion, even if we disagree. Number two, no interruptions. Everyone gets a chance to finish the argument. And number three, let's try to explore this issue from different perspectives. I don't want us to just stick to one side and shut out the other, because sexting is complicated. It has emotional, cultural, psychological, and even legal angles to it. It sounds good so far?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I like the idea of making this as a safe space where we can share our opinion honestly and without being judgmental. With a topic like sexting, people often stay quiet because they don't want to sound weird or get criticized. But if we are open, we might actually learn something. And to add to that, a lot of young people don't have a place to talk about this topic. They usually hear bits and pieces from friends or see stuff online, but it's rarely a full picture. It's easy glamorized, such as sexting is fun, or it's a sign of being in love, or it's easy demonized, such as sexting can ruin your life forever. But the truth is somewhere in the middle. But unless we talk openly, people don't get to see the middle ground. So yeah, I'm glad we're going to tackle this topic in a balanced way.
Exactly. Sexting is happening around us whether we talk about it or not. And I think pretending it doesn't exist is the main problem. A lot of people treat it like a taboo subject, and the silence always seems to figure it out on their own. Well, that's why I think discussions like this are really important. For me, it's not right to only highlight the negative side. We should also understand why they're doing it in the first place. Because when we understand why they're doing it, we can understand how to prevent the risk as well. For example, in Malaysia, there have been reports of Telegram groups with thousands of members sharing deep private pictures. These pictures often started something as innocent between couples, and if no one talks about it, people will realize how common and how dangerous it can be. So yes, being honest about this is the only way to help people.
Exactly. I love that both of you highlighted the importance of honesty. A lot of times, people only hear the scary headlines or moral warnings, but not the actual experiences or reasons behind why sexting happens. That silence makes it more confusing, especially for teens who are trying to figure out relationships and boundaries. If we can have an open, judgment-free discussion, we might uncover not only the risks, but also the deeper motivations and context. So, let's start with something simple as a warm-up question. When you hear the word sexting, what's the very first thing that pops into your mind? Don't overthink it, just your instinctive first reaction.
Honestly, the first word that comes to my mind is definitely risk. I think of news headlines where someone's life gets ruined because of a private picture leak. For me, sexting is less about connection and more about the danger over something about the danger of losing control over something so personal. Like, I think about how fast things spread on social media. One screenshot can move from a private chat to a WhatsApp group to Instagram stories and to the whole school in a matter of hours. And you can't stop it. That sense of losing control is terrifying. And what's worse is people often don't show empathy because they always joke and gossip about it. The person who trusted someone enough to picture ends up being punished the most, while the person who did it sometimes walks away with no consequences. That imbalance infuriates because it's so unfair.
Exactly. And for me, I see both sides. On one hand, sexting is modern flirting, especially for long-distance couples, as seen as a way for maintaining intimacy. I also read articles where young adults even defend it, saying it's normal in their relationship. But honestly, for me, it's like playing with fire. The same photo that feels private today could be the very next thing that ruins your reputation tomorrow. So yes, I do understand the emotional side why people sex, but the risks are always hovering in the background, and they're not their small ones, but their life-changing ones.
That's really interesting. Iman, you immediately thought of risk, which shows how the fear of exposure or leaks is at the front of people's minds. And Mitra, I like that you pointed out the duality. It can feel like harmless flirting, or even romantic when it's consensual, but at the same time, it can flip into regret the moment trust is broken. For me, when I think of sexting, I notice how normalized it has become. 10 years ago, if someone said they were sending explicit pictures, people would be shocked. Now, it's almost casual. It's in jokes, memes, and in TV shows. Apps are designed to make sending things instantly easy, and with features like disappearing messages, people feel like it's low risk. But the reality is, screenshots, leaks, and even the emotional impact don't just vanish. And that makes me wonder, is this normalization a good thing because it reduces stigma, or a bad thing because it makes people careless? So here's our warm-up debate. Do you think sexting being normalized among teens is a good or bad thing?
It's a bad thing, obviously. When something risky becomes normal, people stop being careful. It's like smoking, because when everybody does it, it completely feels harmless. But we all know the damage is real, right? And to push that further, normalization can blur the line between choices and pressure. If everyone in your group says it's just normal, then you might feel like you have to join in, even if you're not comfortable. That's not a real concern. That's more like a social pressure dressed up as a normal behavior. And when you add in the fear of being left out or labeled as boring or crude, a lot of things given just to fit in society. And that's where I see the danger.
That's good, but I say it differently from Iman. I think normalization isn't necessarily all bad. When something becomes normal, it can also reduce the shame if something goes wrong. For instance, if people understand sexting is common, they might even also stop blaming the victim when this happens, alright? So, right now, even the first reaction is often why did she send it instead of why did he share it without consent. So, normalization at least opens doors for more empathy. But I'll also say this. It can be dangerous if normalization happens without proper education. Because then people will feel like it's no big deal and they won't protect themselves. So I would say normalization plus education, not one without the other.
Both of you make great ones. Even your smoking analogy is really powerful. It shows how once something becomes socially acceptable, people start questioning the risk. Mitra, I think you're right too. Shame only makes victims more isolated and perfect. Thanks for sharing the next questions. Okay, so let's dig into the big question. Why do teens do it in the first place? From what I have observed, one of the strongest reasons is pressure. And this pressure comes in two ways. First, direct pressure, like when a boyfriend or girlfriend keeps asking for a picture, saying things like, if you love me, prove it. That kind of demand can make someone feel trapped. But then, there's indirect pressure too, which is sometimes even harder to resist. Imagine scrolling on social media and seeing your peers joking about sexting, sharing memes, or casually talking about sending snaps. It starts to feel like the normal thing in relationships. And if you're not doing it, you might feel left out or even boring. For teens who are desperate to fit in, that kind of pressure can be overwhelming. And the tricky part is, teens are at an age where belonging means everything. You don't want to be the odd one out, and you don't want to disappoint someone you like. So even if deep down you're uncomfortable, the pressure can push you into doing it anyway. What are you guys' thoughts?
I think curiosity is a huge part as well. Because teens are exploring relationship and want to test boundaries. Sexting feels safer than real life intimacy because it's behind a screen. But that safety is an illusion. Let's think about it. When you are teenagers, you are just starting to figure out love, attraction, and even your own identity. That is a natural urge to do an experiment. Sexting gives the impression of a controlled experiment that if no one sees or no one gets pregnant, then there is no consequences. But what's overlooked is the digital footprint. Once a photo or message leaves your phone, it's not fully under your control anymore. That supposed safety net is full of holes, and sometimes it's not even about sex. It's all about curiosity about how people will react. And that curiosity can push teens to take risks that we normally take in face-to-face.
I agree with you, Iman. And context really matters too. A flirty text to your partner might feel very sweet or normal, but the same exact text might feel very invasive or even threatening from a stranger. So sexting isn't just about the action, it's about who you're sending it to, why, and under what circumstances. And here's something I have noticed. Sometimes people excuse pressuring others into sexting by saying it's just harmless fun. But when you put it in context, like a minor receiving those messages, it's not harmless at all. It's called grooming. So for me, defining sexting means looking at the full picture, the content, the context, and the consequences.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you. Curiosity does play a huge role. Adolescence in this time of exploration, and sexting feels like a safe experiment because it's behind the screen. But like you said, that safety is only an illusion. Once something is sent, it's no longer private, no matter what filters or apps promise. And Mitra, your point about validation really hits hard. For some teens, getting that kind of attention feels like proof they are attractive or wanted. And when self-esteem is shaky, that validation becomes addictive. The problem is external validation. You're handing over your self-worth to someone else's approval. And that's a very fragile foundation to build confidence on. So, when you put all these reasons together, pressure, curiosity, validation, it's no wonder sexting is so common. But common doesn't always mean healthy. Do you guys think can sexting ever be healthy in a relationship, or is it always bad? Here's how I see it. In theory, sexting could be healthy if both people are mature, consenting, and respectful, like in a long-distance relationship where it helps keep intimacy alive. But at the same time, no matter how healthy the relationship seems, trust can break, screenshots can exist, phones can get hacked, and friendships could fall apart. So, is sexting just a modern form of intimacy that can be healthy, or is the risk so high that it automatically makes it a bad idea?
Yes, obviously in a mature relationship like long distance couple, it can maintain intimacy. I want to be clear though, this doesn't mean that I think texting is harmless or always a good idea, but I do think there are situations where it can be part of healthy relationship. For example, couple who are apart of months, maybe one partner is studying overseas might use sexting to feel close. In those cases, it's not about peer pressure or validation, but more like a sustaining a bond. The key difference is maturity. Teens often lack of the emotional maturity and foresight to think through the risks. Adults might be better equipped to handle the responsibility. So yes, it can be healthy, but only under very specific conditions, which is mutual consent, respect, and absolute trust.
But I'm going to say no. I don't think sexting can ever truly be healthy in a relationship. Even if you trust someone completely, situations change. Just like Intan said, breakups happen, phones get hacked, love stories get breached. Even in relationships that seem stable, Once things go wrong, those private materials become tools for revenge. So while I understand why some couples say it strengthens intimacy, I personally think the risks outweigh the benefits every single time.
I hear both of you, and I think the car analogy fits perfectly. Driving isn't inherently bad, but it can get you where you need to go. But every time you get in the car, there's a risk of an accident. You can follow all the safety rules and still get hurt because of factors beyond your control. Sexting is kind of like that. It might work fine in some relationships, but the risk is always there, lurking in the background. Alright, let's take this into a real life scenario. Imagine your best friend comes to you and says, "Hey, my partner keeps pressuring me to sex, and I don't know what to do. What advice would you give?" Normalization could help reduce the blame if something goes wrong. For me, the first thing I say is, pressure is already a red flag. Intimacy, whether online or offline, should never come from guilt or obligation. If someone is pushing you to do something you are not ready for, that's not about love. That's about control. And control-based relationships almost always turn toxic. I would also remind them that intimacy doesn't have to look one way. There are so many healthy ways to connect. Spending quality time, sharing personal thoughts, showing care. Sexting isn't the only option, and it shouldn't feel like a requirement. Love that's conditional, send me this or else, isn't really love at all.
I agree with you. I would also definitely tell my friends not to give in. A healthy partner won't pressure you. If they do, then it's obviously a red flag. I would probably start by reassuring my friends that they don't owe anyone their privacy, even digitally. Pressure in a relationship is never a good sign because it's not about love, but it's about control. A partner who genuinely cares about you will respect your boundaries, even if it means not getting what they want.
In this case, I agree with you guys. Well, I will remind them once they send something, they can take it back. If their partner is pushing them, it's about control and no longer love.
Exactly. I think we all agree sexting can feel like a shortcut to intimacy, but if it is driven by pressure or dependency, it stops being about connection and starts being about power. And once power enters the picture, things can turn harmful very quickly. So maybe the real question isn't just why do teens do it, but also what are they hoping to get from it? And if you can find healthy ways to meet those needs, belongings, curiosity, validation, then maybe sexting won't feel like the only option. Now, let's move to the heart of the issue, the risks and consequences of sexting. For me, the biggest risk is privacy, because like you guys said, once you hit send, you lose ownership of whatever you share. People think, oh, it's just between us, but the moment that file leaves your phone, it's no longer yours. It's living in someone else's device and potentially in the cloud or worse, on the internet. It's kind of like throwing a paper airplane in a storm. You have no idea where it will land, who will pick it up, or whether it will end up somewhere you never intended. That's the scariest part. You may still trust the person now, but trust can change. Like I said, friendships can break, relationships can end, and feelings could shift. But the digital footprint still remains. And once it's out there, there's no way to fully take it back.
And also the emotional toll. If it leaves, humiliation, bullying, and depression will leave a deep scar. I think people often underestimate how heavy the emotional weight can be, especially for teens. Imagine us waking up one day and realizing our private pictures circulating around school or even on social media. It's not just about embarrassment, but it's a deep sense of betrayal, shame, and loss of control that can spiral into anxiety, depression, or even self-harm in some cases. And the worst part is victim blaming. Instead of people asking why did someone split this question will shift, will become why did you send this in the first place? That shift in blame makes people feel isolated, like they have no one to turn to. Emotional scars like this don't heal quickly, but they will stick around for years.
That's true, and let's not forget the legal risks either. In Malaysia, sexting among minors can actually fall under child pornography laws. Even if both parties are underage and it's consensual. That means a teenager sending a photo to their partner could unknowingly become a serious crime. In May 2024, even reported cases where police warned that storing or sharing nude photos of anyone under 18 or even yourself could get you charged. That's something most of the teenagers don't realize until it's too late. And beyond the law, there's also the issue of reputation, just like what you guys said. Once a photo is leaked, it doesn't just disappear. It can be shared on forums, social media, and group chats indefinitely. I read about a case where a girl's private pictures kept resurfacing years later, even after she would move schools and start university. So the risk isn't just about getting caught for now. It's the digital footprint that can follow you for your life.
Exactly. Well, if you touch on critical angles, the emotional impact can be devastating. Imagine being 15 or 16 and suddenly your classmates are whispering about a photo of you that are hanging around the internet. That kind of humiliation cuts deep. And what's worse is the bullying doesn't just stop after a week. It can follow someone for years because the internet doesn't forget. And your point about legal consequences is something most teens don't even realize. In many countries, even if two minors are consensually exchanging photos, it can technically be classified as child pornography. Suddenly, a 16-year-old could face legal charges or worse, be labeled as a sex offender just because of one impulsive decision. That's life-altering. So, when people say it's harmless fun, they are not seeing the full weight of the risk involved. Imagine this. If a private photo leaks, who's more at fault? The sender or the sharer? Here's why it's complicated. On one hand, the sharer clearly violates trust and consent, and that betrayal is serious. But on the other hand, people argue that the sender took the initial risk by creating and sending the content. It's a bit like leaving your front door unlocked. Technically, the burglar is to blame for stealing, but you did make it easier by not locking it up. But here's the catch. Comparing people to burglars misses the point. In healthy communities and relationships, we shouldn't have to expect betrayal as the norm. So, yes, sending is risky, but the real harm comes from the person who chooses to exploit that trust. What do you think?
I think obviously the sharer is at fault. Sharing without consent is a betrayal. It's really simple to me because when you share something private that wasn't yours to share, you are the one crossing the line. The sender trusts you, and the trust makes the act of sending vulnerable advantage of that vulnerability. The wrong begins when the other person takes advantage of that vulnerability. Blaming the sender is like blaming a burglar victim for owning valuables. Yes, they had something worth stealing, but the crime is still the burglar choice. In the same way, the sender took a risk, but the harm comes from the sharer's betrayal, not from the act of sending itself.
I would mostly say yes. The sharer is more at fault because they are the one breaking trust and spreading the material without consent. But I also think we can't ignore the role of the sender as well. It's like, just like Ivan said, it's like leaving your house unlocked. You don't deserve to be robbed, but you did create an opening for it to happen. That doesn't mean we should ever be given, but it does mean we need to educate people about the risks if they send anything. To me, it's about prevention. If we don't send it in the first place, we can't lose control over it. That's simple.
I think the middle ground here is quite important. We can acknowledge the risks without blaming the victim. If someone shares private material without consent, that's 100% wrong. But at the same time, we need to teach people that sending does carry risks, just like any other high-stakes issue. The key is prevention without shaming and accountability without victim blaming. Okay, let's put this into a scenario. Imagine a school finds out a sex has been leaked. The question is, do they punish only the sharer or both the sender and the sharer? Personally, I think punishing only the sharer makes sense in terms of accountability because they are the one who broke consent. because but schools often panic and their instinct is to discipline everyone involved. The danger with punishing the sender is that it creates a culture of silence. Victims stop reporting leaks because they are afraid of being punished too. At the same time, I can see why Mitra mentioned both should be addressed, but in a different way. Maybe not punishment for the sender, but education, like workshops or counselings, so they understand the risks better. Meanwhile, the sharer should face real consequences, because without that, the cycle continues. So maybe the balanced approach is accountability for the sharer, education for the sender, and awareness for the whole school community. Now, let's shift gears to the role of social media. Technology is supposed to make life easier, but when it comes to sexting, it often creates a false sense of security. Take Snapchat for example. Because messages disappear, people believe it is safe, but in reality, screenshots, screen recordings, or even a third device can capture everything, and once it is captured, it is permanent. That false security is dangerous because it encourages risky behavior. People think, oh, it's gone in 10 seconds, and they start thinking about the long-term consequences. But the truth is, nothing online ever truly disappears. Even apps that claim to be encrypted aren't immune. Data breaches happen, hackers exist, and screenshots take less than a second.
I agree with you too, Iman. And companies don't always act fast enough when explicit material is reported. When something spread, it's nearly impossible to erase. These platforms profit from our activities, and they should be more responsible for us. Technically, application companies could invest more in prevention system, faster takedowns, and better education. But they often ignore this because the business model prioritizes agreement. And that's dangerous, especially for teens, because they market themselves as fun and safe, but behind the scene, these safeguards aren't safe enough. The false sense of security is what lures people into taking risks they wouldn't otherwise take.
That does make sense, but at the same time, I think it's unrealistic to expect apps to completely stop sexting. People will always find ways to share things. Even if Snapchat or WhatsApp tighten their security, users will just move on to another platform. It's like trying to ban piracy. It never fully disappears, it just shifts. That being said, I do think apps have a responsibility to make their platform safer. For example, Instagram already has filters that blur sensitive images until you confirm you want to see them. Maybe other platforms could expand tools like that too. But at the end of the day, the responsibility can't only be on the apps, it has to be on users as well. Because technology can only do so much if people themselves aren't cautious.
You're both raising solid points. Iman, I agree those companies profit from user engagement, but when it comes to protecting users, they are often reactive instead of proactive. By the time they respond to a report, the damage has already been done. And Mitra, you're right too. Technology can't stop human behavior entirely, but if one app closes the door, people will just move to another platform. But here's the thing, just because we can't stop sexting completely doesn't mean platforms have no responsibility. At the very least, they should be making it harder for abuse to happen, like stronger reporting tools, AI detection for non-consensual sharing, and clear safety warnings before people send sensitive material. Should social media companies be legally responsible for leaked sex? My take is mixed. On one side, if they provide the platform, they should ensure reasonable safety, just like a mall provides security guards. On the other hand, these are private choices people make, and no platform can monitor every single message without involving privacy. So maybe the solution isn't total legal responsibility, but shared responsibility. Companies build safer systems, while users are educated to make safer choice.
Well, my answer would be a yes, because they are the ones who provide the platform. So they should ensure our safety by installing a warning system or stronger reporting tools. I strongly believe that power comes with responsibility. If the companies knew they would face legal or financial consequences when leaked sex went viral on the platform, they would certainly have a lot of motivation to build a safer system. Right now, the burdens fall entirely on the victim, and that is not fair. Legal responsibilities could shift that burden back onto the corporation profiting from the platform in the first place.
Well, I would say social media companies should only be partially responsible. They can provide the tools like the strong return systems, content filters, and the quick removal of harmful contents. But they can't control what every single user decides to send privately. At the same time, they profit from engagement as well. So they do have a duty to keep their users safe. So to me, it's like a shared responsibility as well. The companies, the users, and the government itself all have roles to play.
It seems like the fairest approach is shared accountability. Platforms can't prevent every bad decision, but they can create environments where abuse is harder and safety is clearer. Meanwhile, users need to be empowered with the knowledge to protect themselves. Imagine disappearing messages were banned altogether. Would sexting stop? Honestly, I don't really think so. Like you both say, ban features doesn't erase behavior. It just pushes it underground. People will find another app or even go back to old methods like regular photo sharing. The bigger issue isn't the feature, it's the mindset. If people believe sexting is safe, they'll keep doing it no matter what platforms do. So instead of focusing only on many features, we should focus on shifting how people think about risk and consent. Alright, we have talked about the risk and the role of technology. Now, let's focus on solutions, because the point of all of this isn't just to scare people, but to figure out how to handle reality. For me, the biggest solution is education. Schools, parents, and communities need to stop pretending sexting doesn't exist, because when adults avoid the topic, teens are left to figure it out on their own, usually through peers or the internet, which isn't always the safest source of advice. Education doesn't mean lecturing or shaming. It means giving teens real information like how consent works, what are digital footprints, what the legal consequences could be, and most importantly, what to do if something goes wrong. If a leak happens, they should know where to turn for help instead of suffering in silence. I also think we need to create spaces where teens can talk about relationships, intimacy, and boundaries without feeling judged. If we normalize those conversations, then sexting won't be the secret, taboo thing. It'll just be the one part of a bigger discussion about respect and safety. What are your guys' thoughts?
I agree with you. If teens learn the risk early, they will think twice. Pretending it doesn't happen just makes the kid less prepared. I mean, right now, a lot of schools treat sexting like it's a taboo topic that afford to address. But that silence doesn't stop teens from sexting. It just pushes the conversation underground where misinformation spreads faster than facts. If we actually had open discussion in classroom, kids could see sexting for what it really is, not just something that is exciting or rebellious, but something with long-term consequences. And education isn't just about warning. That approach fails because teens hate being lectured. Instead, it should focus on critical thinking by asking, why am I sending this? What happened if it spread? And that is way more effective than just saying no. It empowers teens to make their own informed decision instead of shaming them into silence.
I agree with you, Iman. And I think parents should also play a huge role in prevention. A lot of families would avoid this topic completely because it feels very awkward and inappropriate. If parents create a safe space for honest conversations, maybe kids won't feel like they have to hide everything from them. And I think the way parents approach it also matters. If the conversation is only about shame, like don't ever do this, it's disgusting, and then the things will shut down completely. Instead, If the conversation is about guidance, for example, here's why this can be harmful, here's how you can protect yourself, it means then things would more likely to listen. To me, prevention isn't about fear, it's about trust and openness.
Exactly. If we can teach the risk early, empower teens to make informed choices, and support them when mistakes happen, we're not just preventing sexting disasters, we're building healthier relationships overall. At the end of the day, the goal isn't to shame people for their choices, it's to equip them with the tools to navigate a digital world that's constantly evolving. Because, let's face it, technology isn't slowing down, and neither is human curiosity. The only real safeguard is knowledge, respect, and open conversation. Is it realistic to expect teens to avoid sexting completely? Alright, let's tackle this head on because I think this is the heart of the issue. The big question is it realistic to expect teens to avoid sexting completely? I mean, we can stand here and say don't do it, it's risky, it's dangerous, and it can ruin your future. And yes, all of that is true. But the reality is, teens live in a world where phones are always in their hands, where communication is quite instant, and where relationships often exist more online than face to face. So, if we say never ever sex, we're almost setting up a rule that's impossible to follow. And when rules feel impossible, teens break them in secret. They won't talk about it and they won't ask for help because they are scared of being judged or punished. That secrecy is what really makes things dangerous. At the same time, I'm not saying sexting is harmless or something to encourage. It definitely carries risk, but maybe the middle ground is teaching boundaries. Instead of a blanket saying no, we could be saying, if you ever feel pressured, here's how to handle it. If you think about it, here's what you need to do. You need to teach them what to say or what to do. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the act of sending or not sending. It's about respect, consent, and responsibility. Teens need guidance on how to set boundaries, both for themselves and for their partners. So, even if sexting happens, it's less risky and less harmful.
I don't think so. I personally believe that teens will experiment on themselves. Instead of saying no, we should focus more on safer practice. We need to be realistic about human behavior, but if we forbid them, they are less likely to listen and more likely to do it in secrecy without guidance. So instead of aiming for complete avoidance, we should teach safer practices. It's not about encouraging sex things, but reducing the damage if it does happen. It's the same logic as teaching safe driving. Instead of just saying never drive.
Well, I disagree with the idea that we should just accept sexting as inevitable. I think we should still encourage teens to avoid it altogether, especially because the risks are so high. A leaked photo is permanent, you can undo it. And we've already seen how devastating it can be for victims, for those whose pictures get shared without their consent. And so while I understand the argument that teens will experiment, I think sexting is too risky to be normalized. The safest approach is still to discourage it as much as possible.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this conversation. We started with the why do teens sex in the first place. We looked at pressure, curiosity, validation, and all the emotions that get wrapped up in it. Then we unpacked the risks. Privacy, emotional scars, even legal consequences. We examine the role of apps, how social media can create this illusion of safety but also enable things to spiral out of control. And finally, we explored solutions, educational, parental involvement, school programs, and open conversations. For me, the biggest takeaway is that sexting is never just about the act of sending a picture or a message. It's about much deeper things. Control, trust, vulnerability, and consequences. When someone hits send, they are putting trust in another person, and they are also handing over control. And once it's gone, the trust can either be honored or betrayed. And that's why the consequences can be so devastating. because it's not just a photo, it's a piece of someone's self-worth, their dignity, and their reputation. I also think these conversations are proof that we can't just give young people a list of do's and don'ts. We need to equip them with critical thinking, self-respect, and with the ability to say no or to say yes with awareness of the risk. And as much as it might feel awkward, these discussions does help. Every time we take away the shame and actually talk about sexting, we make it a less of a taboo, and that makes it easier for someone to ask for help if they ever end up in a bad situation. So,
my takeaway is that sexting is complicated. It can feel like intimacy, but it carries huge risks such as emotional, social, and legal. People need to understand that before making choices. What really stands out to me is how layered this issue is. On the surface, sexting might look like something small or playful, but underneath that, it's tied to self-esteem, peer pressure, relationship, technology, and even the law. That means every decision carries weight.
For me, the biggest lesson is prevention. We can debate all day about whether sexting is more than flirting or if apps are to blame, but the reality is simple. Once something is out there, it's permanent. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people realize how long-term the impact can be. Victims of leaks don't just suffer in the moment. They often carry the stigma for years. Some struggle with mental health, some drop out of schools, and some even face cyberbullying for things they did in their teenage years. That's why prevention is the most powerful solution. The safest choice is always to think twice before sending anything private to someone.
my final reflection is this. Sexting is a modern challenge, but the principles we need are respect, trust, consent, and responsibility are timeless. If we keep those at the center, then no matter how technology evolves, we'll have the tools to navigate it.
I definitely agree with you, because talking openly like this helps us to understand the full picture instead of just saying it's bad or it's fine. So many people only hear one extreme or the other. It's either sexting is harmless or sexting will ruin your life. The truth is somewhere in between. Conversation like this help us to see the real reason why people do it, in the dangers and the possible solution. And when we discuss without judgment, we create a space for teens to ask questions, share their experience, and learn strategies to protect themselves.
And yes, I definitely think discussions like this really help. When we talk openly, we replace rumors and fears with actual knowledge. Instead of just saying don't do it or pretending it doesn't happen, we look at the full picture. The reasons, the risks, and the solutions. Conversations like this also remind people that we are not alone, that others have gone through it too, and that there are ways to protect ourselves. To me, that's the value of this robust discussion. It turns a taboo topic into a learning experience.
And that is all from us. If we continue to talk about the issue, it is sure to be solved. Thank you, and thank you everyone. That's all from us.